Come here. Get off.
Today we're talking to Haylin Belay, pronouns she and her. Haylin is a seasoned sex educator and holistic health promotion professional with a focus in reproductive justice and youth empowerment. With over a decade of hands-on experience developing award-winning health education programming and providing professional development for clinicians, educators, and activists, her expertise is in teaching practical skills for a healthier, more pleasurable life. Love it. She's also a yoga instructor and a spiritual coach who offers group classes, workshops, and one-on-one coaching from a trauma-responsive, integrated mind, body, spirit perspective. Haylin is the creator of Sex Ed for All and My Feminism Involves Witchcraft, and she hosts a web series called How to Sex Toy. Haylin's mission is to support everyone, regardless of gender, orientation, libido, relationship style, kink, fetish, ability, size, trauma background, or sexual experience in living their best and healthiest lives. A practicing witch and professional tarot reader, Haylin lives in New York City with her cat, Princess Walter, and a kitten.
Yes. Also, I'm so sorry. I just realized that that's outdated as well. I moved to Baltimore. I moved to Baltimore about 5 seconds before Corona hit, so I really snuck in under the deadline. Yeah.
Hey, welcome to the area.
Welcome to the area.
Exactly.
Where are y'all calling from?
We're just outside of DC.
Okay. Hey, neighbor.
Yes.
Hey, girl.
And on that note, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, of course. Happy to be here in Baltimore.
What's the kitty's
and on
name?
the show.
Now that we can't have Reverend Jackson, Reverend Kitten. What do you call it? You're taking all the shine.
The big cat is, well, he's not that big, but the big cat is Princess Walter, and then the baby kitten is she's got a little mohawk pattern on her head, so we call her Punk. That's her name.
I love it. Yay. Okay. So we first learned about you and your work when you did a tarot reading on Another Round. Rest in peace.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. Yes.
Yeah,
that was
in the air.
That was a horrible
air horn.
You know what? It was a chicken. Okay.
That definitely was a chicken.
I'm from the Midwest. It took me a while to
even know what the fuck an air horn was.
Yeah, I was like, what is this? At a monster truck rally, maybe. Yeah.
Right.
So anyway. My bad. Continue.
Yes.
Shout out to Another Round.
Yes. So when I was working on my book, How We Fight White Supremacy, I reached out to you and asked you to write what ended up being a really beautiful essay about what it means to be a witch and how that's tied to your liberation and all of our liberation. And folks need to go read that essay. But in the meantime,
available at your favorite bookseller. We'll include a link.
Your favorite Black bookseller.
Black bookseller.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But in the meantime, can you tell us a bit about what being a practicing witch means to you and how you come to this work?
Yeah. So first and foremost, thank you for the opportunity to write that essay. I'm trying to remember. I'm very bad with time. Was that in 2017 or?
Oh, shit.
Oh, it's your
probably.
book.
Listen, it came out in 2019. So yeah, sure. It was in 2017.
Something like that. Yeah. So I stand by, I haven't read it in a minute, but I stand by everything that I said in that essay, most likely. If anything, probably the only edits that I would make now are just the same thing, but even more emphatically. My relationship to witchcraft sort of takes a lot of meandering turns. It's a story that I tell in many of my workshops because I think the story of it explains why I'm teaching all of the seemingly disparate things that I teach. I will say that I am an Ethiopian, and most Ethiopians have a really strong negative relationship with the word witchcraft. So as a child, I was not thinking of anything that I did or that my family did as witchcraft or magic. It was either religious or it was just didn't have a name, right? These like cultural.
We just do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's when I have a stomach ache, my mom puts her hands on my stomach and takes the sickness out. Like that's just it's just a thing that happens. So it wasn't until probably college that I actually started using the word witch specifically, and it really started, embarrassingly enough, from this like kind of pretentious academic, like anthropologist lens of like, witchcraft is a construct, which I don't regret. I think that
Don't you love your collegiate self? You're like, I learned some shit.
A little
Exactly.
tang.
Everybody's nerves at Thanksgiving.
But luckily, the books that led me to were books that were useful for me to read. So the snobbery aside, it was a useful period of time. So I first got interested in the concept of witchcraft from this anthropological lens, but it didn't really become personal until I got my first tarot deck. And I got my first tarot deck at the same time that I was processing a pretty high impact trauma that happened during my college years. So as anyone who has experienced trauma knows, right, when you're in that kind of aftermath, especially really early on, it feels like your organizing idea of what the world is has now shattered, right? Either because you were one way and then something happened and now that way doesn't exist anymore, or because in my case, my organizing principle of the world for a very long time had been organized around my abuser. And so now that person's no longer in my life, right? Who am I? How do I know stuff? How do I make decisions? How do I deal with things? I got a tarot deck mostly because I was like, this will be a fun way to procrastinate from things when I don't feel like doing what I'm supposed to. At least I'll have this like pretty thing to look at and play around with. And every time I picked up my deck, it was like, okay, well, there goes the next 3 hours because I'm going to have to process this. I'm going to have to journal about it and talk about it with my therapist and, process it really deeply. Finding that experience was not just, when I say that I had an anthropological or political interest in the word witchcraft, what I really mean is that the construct of witchcraft as being specifically I don't want to say conflict. Conflict's a harsh word, but in contrast to like a hegemonic view of the world that is top-down, hierarchical, dogmatic, right? These like institutional ways of thinking that is, here's the truth, it's the thing outside of you, and you have to learn how to adopt it. That witchcraft was a statement of personal power, right? I have the power to do things with my will and intention, and also a statement of knowledge. I have the power within me to understand truth. I don't need somebody else to tell me what truth is and learn how to fit myself to truth. I already have it. So that was, I think, first something that I came to, again, politically, right? I went to college, I got radicalized. I was like, no more institutions, everything's a social construct. I'm a witch because I exist in opposition to these constructs. But over time, it became something that little teenager me, who was so a-religious that she started a secular students alliance in high school.
Wow.
Like, which I now look back on and I'm like, what was I doing? What was my area of focus that I was like, this is the really important thing I need to be spending my time doing, is starting an atheist club at school. But now at almost 27 years old, I consider myself a deeply spiritual and a deeply religious person. And I've realized in retrospect that actually that's not something new that I've developed as an adult. It's something that I've had my entire life, but I didn't have the language for a spirituality that wasn't organized religion. I didn't have language for a spirituality that actually did allow for me to be the person that I knew myself to be, that allowed me to work my way out of some of the traumatic experiences of religiosity that I had as a young person. And so it started with the political stuff, the like book stuff, and then it became this spiritual thing. And then I actually moved into this really embodied work. So as you mentioned in the bio, which was so fun to listen to, I love listening to people talk about me.
Yes.
Happy Leo season.
Give yourself your flowers.
Many things I do. I am also a sex educator. That's like my main professional, quote unquote, thing that I've been trained to do, thing that's on my resume. So I had been doing work around bodies and health for a while, but the connection of those two things came pretty late in the game. I think it was probably 2018. 2018 is when I did my yoga teacher training. And that was a choice of, I was like, I know I'm a good sex educator, but I feel like I could be a great sex educator if I was able to not just talk to people about these social emotional skills, but also talk to them about these somatic experiences that they don't have other places to talk about. How do you know what pleasure feels like? How do you know what distress feels like and how to regulate it? And those kinds of questions came later, partially because I'm an overeducated, hyper intellectual, like analytic person, right? I'm just like, like how do we figure out the like,
now that I know this, I need to study it.
Exactly. I want to understand. I have to read all the different theories. Yeah. And which was useful for a while, and then you get to a certain point, and anybody who's done anything with enough intensity or commitment knows that at a certain point you hit the wall of like, you just have to feel it. You can know it, you can say it to other people, but that is not the same thing as feeling it and living it and feeling like it's a part of you. So in the last 2 years, especially, I feel like, it's a very long story, but I feel like it all came around probably in the last 2 years that I really felt like these different things that I was doing as a sex educator, as a social emotional skills educator, as a witch, now feel like they're all part of the same thing, which is pleasure. Obviously, that's related to my sex ed work. That comes as no surprise, but it's also fundamental to what I think of as my spirituality and my witchcraft. A lot of times I call myself a pleasure witch to bring attention to the fact that my practice is really centered around acknowledging the sacredness of my own intuition, which I use pleasure and intuition interchangeably. That body feeling of like, I know that this thing is happening and it's good. That's what I want to privilege in my life.
Wow.
That is, you hit on so many points. I'm like, yes. Particularly the point where you talked about being the president, founder of the Secular Student Club, the SSC. So you and your SSC homies, it's funny because I think about my girlfriends and they laugh like, "Oh, Eric," because I will make a joke about Jesus in a minute. That doesn't mean I don't believe him. You believe in him. It's just, I'm working through some things, and I'm trying to figure out where I fit in it all. So I think it's really dope that you have been able to kind of now look back upon, stand on the mountaintop and look on all your everything and see how it all kind of lines up into seeing who Big Haylin is. Because my next question is, what did baby Haylin think she wanted to be when she grew up?
Oh my God. Baby Haylin wanted to be a film critic. I say that with the question mark at the end because what I wanted to be was an anthropologist, but I didn't know that. I thought that what I wanted to be was a film critic because I was really interested in film as an artifact, a way to like study culture. And then I got to college in the film department that I'd applied to be in and took one class and was like, oh, I hate this. I hate what? Like, why are we talking about, I don't know, like this weird psychoanalytic theory that has nothing to do with lived experience? Like, this is boring.
I was just trying to throw stones at Indiana Jones. Like, that's
film is my second minor. It's definitely its own separate world.
Yes. Yeah. So I was interested in film as a young person, and I did a film studies essay that I'm still really proud of at 18 years old. This really good essay about movie adaptations. And then I went to school and was like, oh, that's actually all the classes that are about film in the way that I want to talk about them are in the anthropology department. That's interesting. Like, let me see what's going on over there.
Yeah.
And then cut to 4 years later, and here I am.
Damn. I love it.
I'm always curious, now that we're hanging out with little Haylin, about the contrast of how we grew up and how we are now. What was the prevailing attitude about sex in your home growing up?
think she's kidding, but still to this day, my mom will tell me she's a virgin. Like,
there's still like 10% of like maybe she believes it.
To this day, I'm like, I don't know if you think that I don't know where babies come from. I don't know. I'm not really sure what this is about, who you're saving face to by saying this. Yeah, the relationship to sex. I mean, baby Haylin, like actual baby Haylin. My mom has this really lovely story about being in the grocery store, and I must have been like 5 or 6. I was young enough to be sitting in the little cart thing. And I was like, Mom, do you know where babies come from? And she was like, oh, it's going to be so funny. Okay, yeah, where do babies come from? And I was like, well, when a sperm and an egg, like, because I had been watching my Bill Nye the Science Guy, and I saw the episode about how conception works, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. That's really cool. I think that I always, on some level, even before I really knew what sex was, had this interest in human sexuality. I think when I was younger, that interest was something that I felt very guilty and embarrassed about. It was not a subject that we talked about in my household. I didn't learn the actual names for like body parts until, or I learned them in Amharic, which is the language my mom speaks, because she wouldn't even say them in English. And really had to learn a lot of things on my own, whether that was from Bill Nye the Science Guy, from educational resources, or from the internet. Little bit bigger baby Haylin, like adolescent Haylin, spends a lot of time online doing research. Really just
online research, and you have to do like in person, what they call it, in person research.
It's
like
a practicum, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I was really just trying to understand what was going on, and I don't think that I knew it was a job that I could have to like talk about sex until college. Like up until that point, even when I had taught sex ed, I had taught sex ed in high school as a youth activist. Oh my God, sorry, the kitten and the cat are like, they're like,
they really are right there. Hey,
teaming up on me.
Hey, Reverend Williams.
All right, you gotta,
your cat, Reverend.
you gotta get out of here. Where was I? So as a high school student, I taught sex ed as part of my youth activist work with the Texas branch of the National GSA Alliance. I don't know if GSAs still exist in that way anymore, but
what's GSA?
Oh, okay. So
I was thinking, we're in DC. I'm thinking General Services Administration. I'm like, I don't think that.
No, that wasn't it. Gay Straight Alliance. It was.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that
it's called a Gay Straight Alliance.
I feel like when I was like coming into college was around the same time that GSA was kind of falling out of fashion as an acronym. Okay. There's like all these new, fun things that people call their affinity clubs, but we were a GSA. And the sex ed work that I did with the GSA Alliance was from the perspective of like, health education is a human right. Queer folks don't get any education that's relevant to their sexuality. I mean, none of us take good sex ed, but especially queer folks don't take good sex ed. So we're going to teach young people how to give sex ed to their peers. And I was like, that's so cool that I get to do this. Like, this is really fun and engaging and meaningful to me. It's too bad that I don't know what I want to do for a living, or like I'm not sure, how I'm going to find a career at some point when I grow up. And then I went to college and was volunteering in another peer education program and working at the health promotion office, and just like, I'm really just trying to figure out what I want to do with my life, and I can't figure it out. And finally, it literally took until probably my junior or senior year for, I think it was a mentor of mine said to me, talking about something, just my resume. I was just like talking about stuff that I had done. And she was like, do you realize that you have been working in the field for 6 years? I was like, oh, no. But now that you said that, that sounds really cool. Like I've been working in the field for 6 years. So it's something that I think in part because it was so like secret and taboo, right? Like I knew that it existed and that I wasn't supposed to be talking about it. And on some level, like my mom in the grocery store being like, "Oh no, don't talk about the sperm," was like, "Oh, I'm not supposed to talk about the sperm." Okay.
Right. This, you know,
Okay.
was that a nerve?
Okay. Interesting. I'm going to file that away for later.
Right.
I love it. So I was digging around on your website to prepare for this great website, by the way. And what I love is your manifesto. Like it's just so dope. It's like, this is who I am. This is what I believe. And one of the things you said is that it's grounded by the belief that everyone deserves an integrated sex life and healthy pursuit of pleasure. What does that mean to you?
Yeah. So on my website, I break it down kind of piece by piece, and then break down piece by piece here as well. So starting with that first part, what it means to have an integrated sex life, I think, speaking from my own experience, we are really trained to think of our sex life as something that is completely separate and distinct from our real life. And that I think even goes for people who do have some kind of sex ed or do have a kind of more open relationship to sexuality. There's still this idea of, you know, it's dirty, it's secret, it should be hidden, it should be in the shadows. And I think that separation in and of itself does so much damage, causes so much harm, is the root of so much pain and hurt and trauma. Because when you are separating and bisecting these parts of yourself, inevitably part of what happens is so that dissonance comes out in, I mean, as I was saying earlier, I have a holistic perspective. So not just in your emotional life, not just in your relationships, but literally physically in your body. Mm-hmm. I have had a lot of conversations with folks, not just women, but most often women, where we'll be talking about things that they assume to be kind of anatomical or biological things happening with their body. And then through dialogue and education, finding out that actually that is something that has way more to do with an emotional reality, a psychological reality, that it's not, oh, my body just does XYZ. It's your body does XYZ under very specific circumstances.
Like a dry ass pussy.
Yes. For example.
Yeah.
For example, mm-hmm. Like if now, it's not to say that vaginal dryness isn't a thing that people can struggle with. And also, I think there's a lot of people in the world who are experiencing vaginal dryness, quote unquote, who actually are just not aroused and don't realize what it feels like to be aroused in a way that would allow them to know, oh, that's why this is happening. I need to ask for XYZ, or I need to do ABC differently.
I've been there with a whole ass partner who told me there was something wrong with me, but I just didn't want him.
Yeah. I mean, when I work in, I've worked in a couple of sex shops on and off for the last few years, which, oh my God, that was like my side, like fun money in college and like right after college. Mm-hmm. Best job. Worst job because it's retail, but best job for everything else. So the
dry pussies.
Dry pussies. Working in sex shops is probably the best ethnographic research, like sociological study of sexuality that I think is even possible. It's really hard to get people to like self disclose or self-describe their sexuality. But when you have them in a context where they think they're having a retail interaction, they'll actually tell you a lot more and be a lot more honest than in a situation where it's like, okay, I'm the sex educator. I'm the like public health police, basically. And you're going to sit here and lie and tell me that you use condoms every time because you think you're going to get in trouble if you don't tell me the truth. Being in sex shops, again, I cannot count how many times I felt like I was not just educating somebody about sexuality, but also doing some relationship counseling and mediating some conversations that partners felt like they could not have directly with each other. Being that kind of third external point to help communicate things in language that folks didn't have. And why do people not have this language? Because we're taught to think of our sex life as something separate from our real life. So why would you need to know this language around sex? Why would you need to have an expertise around sexuality? Why would you be curious about it unless it was for dirty reasons? And that stigma, in my own personal life, right? As I was saying earlier, have always been interested in sex and sexuality. I've also, ever since I hit adolescence, have always been a highly sexually motivated person. I think sex is fun and cool. And even just that, not even talking about what I do for a living, but even just being a person, an adult woman who thinks that sex is fun and cool, automatically with it comes, oh, well, if you think that sex is fun and cool, it must be because you are a prostitute. That's the only reason, right? Like those two things go hand in hand, because why else would you care about sex and sexuality unless it was for reasons related to what is society is going to think of as like vulgar reasons, profane reasons. So even just that part, not even talking about the healthy pursuit of pleasure, but just having an integrated sex life, to me is one of the most important aspects of the work that I do, being able to have a conversation with somebody about sex and sexuality and help them develop that language of, you can describe yourself with your personality traits, that you're brave or that you're, funny, whatever, to have that same language about your sexual desires, your sexual personality, your erotic imagination, your relationship styles, your needs, your wants, your boundaries, all of these different things. The healthy pursuit of pleasure is ideally where that integration will lead you, right? That to be able to repair this part of yourself allows for a connection to what pleasure is and a kind of confidence in the pursuit of that pleasure that makes it easier to make healthy decisions, that makes it more natural to make healthy decisions, because the experience of sexuality isn't, like you're watching a scary movie, like I'm covering my eyes, I'm holding my breath, like I hate everything about this, it's so nerve-wracking to be doing this at all. And so I'm stumbling through it and I'm not even maybe noticing what my experience of it is. I've noticed that there's something kind of specifically transformative about sexuality and embracing sexuality and healing the relationship to sexuality. It's one of the reasons why I love being a sex educator just in general. One of the best pieces of career advice I ever got was you should do the thing that people you love to do. And I love sex educators, like not every single one of them. Not going to name names, but not every single one of them is an amazing person who I want to hang out with. But on average, right, like when I'm going to a conference, when I'm going to an industry event, when I'm meeting somebody who works in the field, not all of them, but oftentimes these are people who are really comfortable holding on to challenging conversations. They're people who have taken the time and the effort to work through their own internalized biases and bullshit. They're people who are on some level, just by virtue of what they do for a living, saying, I reject this respectability notion that's based in white supremacy, that sexuality is somehow antithetical to humanity, expertise, like all of these things, right? To be able to do that work with sexuality, which is this really embodied thing, this thing that is requires you to have a relationship to your body that is curious and introspective, and again, most importantly, accepting, I think is a really specifically useful way of thinking about healing some of those emotional, psychological, social wounds that come from not just acute, like capital T trauma, but also the general trauma of, I used to say, like existing, as a marginalized community, like existing under these specific oppressions. In 2020, existing, right? Just period, existing. We're all walking around with cracks in the armor, right? We're all walking around with this experience of there's something outside of me that is bigger than me that's saying I am wrong about what the truth is and that I can't do anything about it. And to be able to say, actually, no, I know what the truth is and I can do things about it, whether that is from the perspective of sexuality, right? Like, I actually know that wet ass pussy is a good thing, and I reject this narrative that it is not a good thing, and I'm going to go make that wet ass pussy a reality. Like, that is one form of liberation.
That's right.
That I think really naturally brings us to other forms of liberation, being able to say, oh wait, actually, now that I've experienced the pleasure of believing in and acting on my own internal knowledge, where else can I do that? Like, where else in my life am I going to be able to have this same experience of saying, oh, I know that you said X, Y, and Z, but I say A, B, and C. And so A, B, and C is what it is.
You know, you are like, we have a list of questions, as all interviewers do. And I feel like you've touched on, like, you've answered so many of them already because you're just such a pew, 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 pew. I would do my air horns, but y'all be hating on them.
I mean, it's not good. It's fine. I can't do it at all. So I appreciate that you even try, because I won't.
Anyway.
Bold, brave.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
No. Okay. So I'm going to jump around a little bit because you touched on this. I am, through this podcast, I have realized that I have a love for sex education and am working to become a sexuality educator. And yay. And I've met so many cool, amazing Black femme sex ed educators. But I feel like I'm in a bubble because, like, I'm in this, like, amazing little turn on bubble. I find, like, amazing people like you. Y'all, like, I'm over here on mute shouting, preach. But then I realized, like, as I, like, go to classes and workshops and conferences, this is a white ass community. And I just wanted to find out, what do you think the role of anti-Blackness plays in keeping us from pursuing this as a profession, and what can we do?
I'm glad you asked. So this is a soapbox that I find myself standing on really frequently, because it's actually pretty common for me to teach some adult workshop and then someone comes up to me afterwards and is like, you can do this as a job? How do I have this job? Like, they have that same awakening moment of like, oh wait, this is actually really cool. How do you do this? One of the first and most obvious ways to switch careers or to build a new skill set is certification. And certification as a concept fundamentally is anti-Black. So let's start there, right? Like, the fact that there are
it's expensive, bodies, it requires a shitload of money, time. Like, I don't think that I would have been able to pursue certification as much as I have these past few months, is because I am in the middle of a pandemic, and so I'm able to work from home. And before that, I unfortunately had a sickness and was on medical leave for a while. But in that time, had the ability, like, I had a job that gave me good benefits, that gave me the ability to stay at home, like, and I say this all, I'm sorry, I'm talking to you, but I say this all the time. I'm like, fussing and all this, but I say this all the time, that, like, so many of our aunties have been sex educators and just haven't, and it hasn't been formalized. Or, like, you got a cool cousin that tells you, girl, don't forget to pee after you have sex, or make sure you look at, like, just little things like that. And we fail to, like, remember that this is a thing. And so,
yeah, a lot of my sex ed came from, Lil Kim and Trina. They taught me a lot.
Yes.
I learned many things, yes, about pleasure and sexual communication. Yeah, I think so. On the note of certifying, I've been a sex educator for over a decade at this point, and I am not even eligible for ASEX certification. I could not get certification if I tried. Again, not going to name any names, but I've also met certified sexuality educators who I would not trust in any classroom, because the specific parameters of what you have to know to be a certified sex educator through ASECT and the parameters of what I think makes a quality sex educator, there's some overlap, but there's also some really important things that are not considered part of your critical knowledge for being a certified sex educator. For example, you don't have to engage with any kind of conversation about anti-Blackness, which seems like a really big blind spot for someone who is going to be working specifically in sexuality, working specifically against sexual stigma that is, by its nature, really heavily rooted in anti-Blackness. There's a colleague of mine who ran a POC-led SAR, which is like it's a training you have to do to get ASEC certification, on top of all the other things that you have to do. And the training that she led was either the first POC-led SAR. Either the first or one of very, very, very few. And this is an institution that's been around for a while. So if this institution's been around for a while and this was the first POC training that they had, what does that tell you about the standards for certification going back to the origin of this institution? What's the purpose of saying, okay, you've got a stamp next to your name that you can be a sexuality educator, other than to create a barrier to artificially keep people who have tons of knowledge, tons of expertise. And some of the best sexuality educators I know are not just not public health professionals, but they didn't study sex ed in school. Some of the best educators I know come from peer education programs. I'm not just saying that because I came from a peer education program. I'm saying that because I think that peer education programs really uniquely equip people to learn sort of what I was alluding to earlier, right? Not just the content, but also feeling and living and experiencing what your students are experiencing. And I think that's so, so crucial for being a sexuality educator. And that's not something that ASEX measures for. Mm-hmm. To be clear, I'm not saying that the problem is that there should be a better certification. What I'm saying is certification is bunk as a concept, especially in a field like sex ed. Like I would have people ask me, do I need certification? And usually my response would be, if you feel like you have a lack of knowledge, that pursuing certification would help you build. Like you need a foundation of kind of like the main components of a comprehensive sex ed program. Sure, like find a way to make it work for you. Know that there are other ways you can get that education that aren't through a certifying program. It just might be harder or take more work to track those things down. But if you already know stuff about sex, if you've been working in a sex shop for 4 years, if you're somebody who, like me, is just very interested in sex and sexuality and went out of their way to study sexual anatomy and to read lots of books and to develop a really robust language around it, if you know things, that's all you need to know. You just have to know things and know how to communicate them to other people. It's not like being a yoga instructor or a pilot where you legally are not allowed to give sex ed unless you have the certificate saying that you can give sex ed. Really, as you were alluding to earlier, all of us are sexuality educators in some form or fashion, right? If you are having a conversation about sex, if you're sharing information, if you're having conversations about different perspectives, you're engaged in that work of helping somebody else and helping yourself develop your sexual sovereignty. That's like a really political word for something that I'm trying to talk about something very human. Just having language for who you are, knowing yourself. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, I think in conclusion, certification sucks. And I really wish that it was possible look at it this way. The history of sex ed in America really starts with patriarchy, starts with essentially marriage education, right? Here's how to be a husband, how to be a wife. And then we get into a version of sex ed that's about kind of moral purity, right?
Yeah, don't come back with those dirty diseases.
Don't get pregnant, don't get infected. Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, HIV, the AIDS crisis, that pandemic means that to this day in New York City, so right now there's I think it's like a city policy that you have to do comprehensive sex ed, but there is a statewide policy that you have to have 6 hours of specifically HIV/AIDS curriculum. Like not sex ed curriculum, HIV/AIDS. And that's a byproduct from a period of time where sex ed and HIV and AIDS prevention meant the same thing.
Wow.
Like sex is just like, that is just rooted in so much like negativity and stigma and just wrongness that I'm usually not a speechless kind of gal.
Flabbergasted.
Like, huh? Like, there's so much more. Yeah, there's so much more about sex than just how not to get a disease. Because then you have all these kids walking around like the first thing you think about with sex is disease, you know?
Well, and it doesn't do anything to address the structural racism that leads to the very real fact that we are the people who have these high transmission rates either. Like, it's just a shaming tactic that does nothing to actually educate people or make them safer or do any of the things that sex education should really do, like educating you about your bodies and helping you to feel rooted in that and safe in that.
Yeah, it's one.
I'm sorry.
Oh.
This reminds me of when my son wouldn't brush his teeth. And so I'd like Google images of like rotted mouths. Like, brush your teeth. Like there was no
straight.
There was no like in between. Yes, I was wrong. But it's just like, this ain't doing shit. So yeah, sorry.
Well, no, I mean, those scare tactics, for something like sex and sexuality, I can understand and empathize on some level, right? Especially my younger sister she just turned 12. And even as a sexuality educator, sometimes she'll say stuff to me about sex where like I have to like take a breath and be like, it's developmentally appropriate for her to ask this question. Like it is like actually nothing weird is happening, even though on some level I'm like, oh my God, but you're a baby. Oh my God, but you're,
yeah.
And I can only imagine as a parent feeling like, oh my God, but you're a baby. I want to protect you. I want you to not experience all of these, what public health world calls negative health outcomes related to sexuality, like STIs, or unwanted pregnancies, or whatever the case may be, abusive relationships. But the research both meaning like actual formal research and also like just lived experience. Look at the world. Yeah. If all you do is tell people don't have sex or don't have risky sex, they're just gonna be like, okay, like whatever. Like they're gonna sit in the room and they're gonna look at you and they're gonna write what they think they have to write on the little form, and then they're gonna go do whatever the hell they were gonna do anyways. And now they're gonna go do it without any extra information about how to do it safely, about how to do it responsibly, how to communicate about doing it. They're just out here doing it with the information that they got from TV, movies, their older cousin, kids at school, right? Sources that, because we live in a society that does not generally have good sex ed as a baseline, all of those sources are suspect sources for receiving sexuality education. It's especially upsetting as someone who's in the field to know that this information exists, right? So for example, great example, sexual violence prevention. Without going too deep into the weeds, one of the most effective things to do to prevent sexual violence from happening in the first place is consent education with a focus on social emotional skills. So that's stuff like empathy and boundaries and emotional regulation, right? Things that you almost never hear people talking about in sex ed classrooms. The fact that that is information that exists in the world, and yet it's not information that's widely known. It's not information that policy gets written around. It's not even information that most curriculums get written around. A lot of curriculums are still using language like pregnancy prevention program. Like that's what we're here to do. And that's not really going much deeper than that. When people ask me like what I think my job is, talking to middle schoolers and high schoolers about sex, my job is telling young people how to have good sex. And I think on a baseline level, people hear that and they're like, like, but that's gross. But it's not gross. Do you want them to get to adulthood and not know how to have good sex, to not know what's pleasurable, what's safe, what exists in the world, what their options are? Because I think about what my formative experiences were of sexuality and of relationships. And I was lucky that I had been teaching sex ed for a while before I had sex for the first time. So I was like, I know how to put a condom on, and I have one with me, and I'm going to use it, and I know how to communicate about it. And also I'm going to have an orgasm because that's something that I'm allowed to ask for in this experience and feel entitled to. And that was a huge benefit that came from having even that baseline education in, condoms and anatomy. But the relationship trauma that I experienced in college was something that the sex ed that I had been teaching didn't talk about, didn't prepare me for. To have had that information as a young person. And again, to know that the information exists and that people don't get it is like, it literally keeps me up at night. I'm getting kind of like choked up talking about it right now, that like so many people experience trauma, or even if it's not traumatic, just bad sex. Like, it breaks my heart to think of all the people in the world who do not have the sex life that they want to have. And I don't mean like they're not having the like orgies and like, you know, multiple orgasms that they want to have, but I just mean literally that the things that would bring them pleasure and the things that exist in their life are mismatched when we know how to make things different. We know the information of how do we keep people from being in abusive relationships? How do we keep people from getting pregnant when they don't want to be pregnant, or from spreading infections? It's not by going in and saying, don't have sex. We know that actually going in and saying, don't have sex does the exact opposite thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. So we know what keeps you up at night. What's your favorite thing about what you do?
Oh, I mean, my favorite thing about what I do is that I get paid to do the thing that I care most about in the world. That's like, how many people get to say that in 2020, in this stage of late capitalism, that I feel so strongly that this is not just something that's important to me because I care about sexuality, but also as an aspect of the greater work towards social justice, and the greater work towards liberation. I feel so blessed that like the exact thing that distresses me most is also something that I get to get up every day and do something about, and also people pay me for it. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So, what do you wish more Black people knew about sex and sexuality?
Okay, wow, there's a whole long list of things. I mean, the first and most, like, I think easy basic one is it is okay to talk about it, and talk about it meaning like talk about it with vulnerability and like openness and honesty. There's this really, I think, painful double consciousness, like this internalization or reflection of the hypersexualization of Black people and Black bodies, sort of mingling with our natural human psychology and physiology, and leading to these circumstances where I see, for example, I used to work with a group that was exclusively high school girls, mostly Black and brown teenage girls. And there was so much expectation around sex and sexuality that was, if you compared it to like the independent schools that I also taught in, which is like in New York, independent meaning wealthy schools. So these are super rich kids, mostly white kids. They cannot even say vagina, let alone pussy, like in a classroom. Mm-hmm. They're like too scared. And then being in this other classroom, and superficially, it looks like, oh, well, they're using the language, they're talking about it, they know about it, but the relationship to it is just the exact mirror reflection opposite of the expectation for white femininity, right? If white womanhood is being desexualized, being beautiful, but not sexy because that's trashy, mm-hmm. then Black femininity has this obligation to be sexy. And to be sexy is not necessarily the same thing as experiencing pleasure. I mean, I know we've talked about it a couple of times, but I'm bringing it up again. Wet ass pussy has everybody so mad, not because it's about sex, because there's plenty of music about sex, but because it's about women's pleasure. And that's the part that I think I wish that it felt like something. I'll put it this way. Me existing in the body that I have is something that I have to think about in every single classroom that I'm in. And one of the reasons why I was doing work with a group of all girls is because at a certain point, I realized like, oh, at about age 13, boys learn that one of the ways that they can feel like good about themselves or kind of like get status with their peers is to be demeaning towards women. So me going into that classroom and to talk about sexuality, which is going to immediately trigger all their stuff and they're going to need some outlet for it. And I'm the person who's standing there. By age 13, 14, they've already learned that. By age 16, 17, they're taller than me. So that's probably not the classroom where I'm going to be the most impactful and most effective.
And there's no safety there.
Yeah, I mean, there's the, like, physically, right? It's like, I'm not worried about a young person physically attacking me. But to be in a space like that and have to hear, I'm saying have to hear as though I don't have this job on purpose. But it's still really painful to have to hear people expressing things as not just fact, but like, this is the way the world is. Because what I'm hearing is that external truth that's been saying, like, I have to consume you, right? Like, you have to believe in me, you have to ascribe to this, or else you're wrong. They got you. Like, they got you. They completely got you. And you're doing it now in a way that, because of who I am and how you perceive me, I'm not going to be the one who's going to be able to pull you out of it.
Mm-hmm. That's real.
Mm-hmm.
You got to know what you can and what you can't do.
Yep.
I want to take it back a little bit and tie in the book that we read last week. So it stars a witch, and it has this whole intricate mythology that center Black people, which is really hard for us to find. Like, we've known that we wanted to have you on the show legit since we started the show.
Like, you were like one of our first.
Oh my God.
Yeah, you were
seriously.
one of our first people.
But we had a hell of a time finding a book that we thought was a natural tie-in, to the point where we were just gonna be like, fuck it, let's just have her on the show. We finally found something. But it was interesting because, it's a fantasy book, right? It doesn't feel like anything that I've ever read about what modern witchcraft is. I'm wondering, what does popular culture get wrong about being a witch?
Oh, almost everything. Pretty much every single thing. The popular conception of witchcraft, especially in North America, is like pretty interchangeable with Wiccan, or Wicca, which, for folks who don't know, is a religion. It's a specific collection of beliefs about how to use magic, and magic is one of the tools that religion uses. Witchcraft as a practice is a lot more malleable. It's a lot more magical, in my opinion, because witchcraft doesn't describe a collection of beliefs. It describes a way of interacting with the world. So this motif I keep coming back to, right, of I have knowledge within me and I can affect change in the world. That's intuition and manifestation. And arguably, all magic falls under those two big umbrella categories. You're either trying to access your inner knowledge, or you're trying to make your internal desire into an external reality. Magic in popular culture is usually, first we have to consider the fact that witchcraft is going to be generally maligned. There's reasons why a lot of the examples of witchcraft that we see in our popular culture are negative depictions of scary witches, right? Because we live in a country that is, quote unquote, built on Judeo-Christian values, and one of those values is no witchcraft. But
putting kids in cages and shit.
That's super normal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And also, to be honest with you, a lot of the things that I do in my current witchcraft practice are things that I learned to do as a young person in the Orthodox Church. Because guess what? That stuff is also magic.
Yeah.
By any other name, you know what I mean? Like, because it's coming from this external source, you're going to call it a different form of knowledge. But guess what? What you do and what I do are actually not that different.
Mm-hmm.
Something else that I think is missing in the popular conception of witchcraft is an understanding of what magic does, like the function of magic, why people practice magic. I'm thinking about like just movies that I'm mostly Halloween movies that I'm thinking of, frankly, that have like witches with the pointy hats and the broomsticks. But I can't think of a time where I've seen a depiction of a witch in popular culture that was a disenfranchised person, was a Black person using magic to seek justice as an alternative to institutions that were denying them justice, or using it as a way to access healing in defiance of institutions that were denying them healing. And that is, especially in America, like the foundation of so much of what witchcraft is. Witchcraft is a tool of the oppressed to use their personal power, their willpower, to enact change in the world, in a world that otherwise maybe doesn't give them many other routes or avenues for affecting change. And that's really a perspective of magic I don't see very often. Usually it's just like, either it's bippity boppity boo, it's like that kind of fanciful magic, or it's, you know, tarot cards and black makeup and
The craft.
stuff like that. Yeah, exactly. Which I will say, one thing to say about the craft is that they are using magic the way that magic is really meant to be used.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all feel downtrodden? Use the magic.
Get your mama
lift
an
yourself
apartment.
up. Literally lift yourself, levitate off the ground, and get up.
What books or resources outside of books would you recommend for our listeners who want to delve into their own sexuality or spirituality?
Oh my God. So first I'm going to give my annoying answer that I give when people ask me this question in classes. Because usually I get the question of like, what books should I read about spirituality specifically? And my response is usually, I'm not going to give you a reading list, right? Like the resource that's going to help you learn more about your spiritual practice is your own intuition. So I'm happy to talk to you about how to hone that tool so that you can really feel confident in it. But I'm not going to tell you, here's 5 books that you should read, because then we're just doing the thing that you said you wanted to get away from over again, right? You said that you were done with having these external truths enforced upon you. So don't take mine. I don't want mine to be the replacement. I want you to find your own. So that's my caveat for any recommendation I give ever. Like, the resources that I find useful are not going to be universally useful. They're the language that made sense to me. And I'm an expert, but I'm not like the only expert. You're also an expert in your own spirituality and your own sexuality. That being said, there is a book called Magic, The Real Alchemy. And I'm blanking on who it's by. I'm not even necessarily naming it because I think everyone should go out and pick it up. But it is a book that like came into my life very randomly. It was a gift. I think it was a gift from a friend of mine around the time of my graduation, because I just started using this language of witchcraft. And it's a book that I think has helped me to develop a language of like, how do I describe my own spiritual practice? I don't agree with everything that's in the book, but I think it's a really beautiful way of looking at magic and witchcraft, not just as a thing that you do, right? It's not just like a collection of rituals, but as a philosophy, as an organizing way to see the world. As far as sexuality, I think opening up or discovering your sexuality is very much like spirituality, a super, super individualized process. So on a similar note, I would recommend to anyone who's curious to, I was about to say go to a sex shop, don't go to a sex shop, but go to a sex shop's website and look at their book section.
Right. Damn
because,
coronavirus.
Yeah. But there's so many books that are out there covering every possible different topic that you could want to learn about with sexuality. And almost all of them are going to have information that in some way like disagrees with each other or presents different versions of the same information, because sexuality is, partially because it's so taboo, an area where our knowledge is always growing and changing. And also there's a lot of misconceptions that we're working through kind of in real time. The one book that I would say, if you're interested in being a sex educator specifically, I would really strongly recommend is Trans Bodies, Trans Selves. The title is a play on our bodies, ourselves, and the entire text isn't specifically about sexuality. The section that is about sexuality specifically completely changed the way that I teach sex ed. And honestly, the entire book, it's like huge. It's an encyclopedic kind of text, and it's something that I use as a reference and go back to all the time. I think as a cis person, I had been teaching queer inclusive sex ed for a long time, and I don't think that I actually had a really deep understanding of what that meant until I read Trans Bodies, Trans Selves. So that's a book that I would wholeheartedly recommend. Everything else, sorry, you're gonna have to figure out by yourself.
Okay, so really quickly, I want you to rank the following pleasure, what are they? Things that bring you pleasure. I want you to rank them. We've got food, sleep, sex, music and books, that's one together, and pets. Rank them.
One question. Is it based on how often I do it or how much I enjoyment when I engage with it?
Yeah.
Enjoyment. Okay. Sex, pets, food, music, books, sleep.
Ooh, okay.
Was that a controversial list?
No, I like it. I like it. No, I like it. Yeah. All right.
What's your ranking?
Me?
Yeah.
It will probably be food, sex, or if I could like incorporate the food in the sex, that would be great.
Mhm.
I love my dog so much.
Mhm.
Music and books, pets and sleep.
Wow.
And I love
I'm gonna
sleep.
tell your dog you put him in 4th place.
I know, he's the sweetest thing. Somebody else will take care of him.
He gonna feel bad.
What about you, Kenrya?
I think it's sex, sleep, food. No, sex, sleep, music and books, food, and pets, because I don't really like animals.
Wow.
I'm sorry. I love your dog, but listen, I am a person who could live her whole life without having something crawling around in her house.
Oh my gosh,
I know.
they just love you so much.
They do.
Okay.
They do though. Every time I go down
do.
to Erica's house, her dog rushes me. I think it's because they know.
It's because, as I say, they know that you need a dog in your life. That's
exactly.
Here's the thing. I am so allergic to every fucking thing. And I think that's part of why it's not a pleasurable thing to me. Like I have to pop an extra Zyrtec just to go to her house. And we have friends whose houses I can't go. And her house is spotless.
She made it seem like I was watching Hoarders last night, so I got triggered.
No, your house is spotless. But like we have friends who have cats, which I'm extraordinarily allergic to. I can't even sit in their house because I get super sick. So yeah, pets are last on the list to me. But
I'm technically allergic to cats, but
are you?
I just love my cat a lot, so I get over it.
Girl, I can't. I literally can't breathe. Wheat. It's too bad. Yes.
Yeah, I mean my cat allergy is just I didn't wash my pillowcase.
Yeah.
Since last week, and now it's his pillowcase, and I got
exactly. Okay, so what is next for you?
Oh, that's a great question. Y'all have any ideas? What is next?
Getting to know the city of Baltimore.
Mm-hmm. But not because it's not safe.
Right.
Yeah. So stay in your ass in the house.
March 1st.
Oh,
and
Lord.
I first of all, I moved here thinking it was going to be a temporary move. I thought I was going to be in and out of New York every other weekend. I didn't even say goodbye to anybody.
I'll be in New York all the time. I was like,
oh yeah, I'll be there all the time. No worries. I'm not even saying goodbye to y'all. I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Cut to
6 months later.
I was gonna say, how long has it been? Cut to now. Yeah. So I have explored. There's one park within walking distance of my house, and it's beautiful. And I'm trying to go there at least 3 times a week. And that's really one of very few things that I have planned. Like if my agenda, generally speaking, I've been trying to keep as clear as possible. Being stuck in the house, having really not a lot of confidence that I know enough to plan as far out in the future as I normally would. I was diagnosed with ADHD like 10 months ago at this point.
Oh, wow.
Which is, at my big age, finally figured out what was going on in my brain for that whole 26 years leading up to it. And I'm so glad that I have that language and knowledge now, because it's really helped me to see how much of my planning and organization and kind of future orientedness was a coping strategy for just trying to deal with the brain chaos. So as far as what's coming up next for me, I'm still teaching, I'm still seeing clients, but I'm really trying to go with the flow as much as possible and take this time as an opportunity, especially as a person with an executive function disorder, to just like be very gentle with myself. I'm like, I have 3 things that I'm trying to do per day, and one of them is yoga. So like really 2 things that I'm trying to do per day. And if I don't do them, that's also fine. Like we were talking about this before we started recording, but I've been for a while in my adulthood working through, perfectionism and internalized anxiety about performance. And now in 2020, I'm like, I give infinite amounts of grace to myself, to other people, compassion. I understand. Life is hard. So I'm trying to be understanding with myself.
It is.
That's dope.
Yeah, it is dope. And I'm glad that you're there. Where can people find you?
So pretty much everything I do is at haylin.co. My website is haylin.co. My Instagram is haylin.co. And then probably the easiest way to find out what I'm doing as I'm doing it is either to follow me on Instagram or to bookmark my links page, haylin.co/links. That's where I post all of my upcoming workshops, my availability for bookings, stuff that I'm writing and working on, etc., etc.
Dope. And that's HAYLIN.CO, not .com, folks. Thank you. Exactly. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been so fucking dope.
Yeah,
you're an amazing person. So thank you for finally. I mean, not that
it took you a long time, because you were like, yes,
to get our shit together to invite you. So
yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. It's been a joy to talk to two people. That's so exciting. Wow. But no, actually, thank you for the invitation. It's been a joy to talk about these topics. I feel like the thing that I haven't been able to do during quarantine is talk about sex ed. My conferences got canceled. My professional development trainings, no more. So it was really a pleasure.
Yay. Well, thank you for being with us. And that wraps up this week's episode of The Turn On. Thank y'all for listening. This episode was produced by us, Kenrya and Erica, and edited by Ballistic. The theme music is from Brazy. Now you can support The Turn On and get off. Subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app, then drop us a 5-star review, and you'll be entered to win something that's turning us on. Just post your review and email us a screenshot at theturnonpodcast@gmail.com to enter. Our Patreon page is also live. Become a supporter today and you'll gain access to lots of goodies, including the Turn On Book Club and 2-for-1 raffle entries. And don't forget to send us your book recommendations and your sex and related questions. And follow us on Twitter at The Turn On Pod and Instagram at The Turn On Podcast. You can find links to books, merch, transcripts, guest info, and other fun stuff at theturnonpodcast.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you soon. Bye.